Okay. So we are in our last session tonight, and we are doing part two of understanding services and the structure and the meaning of the prayers. Just a really brief introduction to it. You could do a whole class just on this topic. Um, and maybe you'll remember from last week this little cartoon that shows you the five main parts of a service. And last time we focused in on the second one, the Shema and her blessings. And tonight we're going to focus in not exclusively, but primarily on the Tefillah section of the service that is sometimes called the Amidah, which means standing. And that's why the guy is standing with a prayer book. We talked last time about how not every service has a Torah service. So if there is a Torah service, that would be part 4. And if not, you go directly to the closing parts of the service, which is the person bending over as if doing the Aleinu prayer. So tonight we're going to talk about the Tefillah or the Amidah section, and I'm going to start with a metaphor. And the question is, how is the Tefillah structure like asking to borrow the car? So you remember back in the day when there was maybe a one-car family and you were a teenager and you wanted that car to go somewhere, go out with friends or whatever, go out for the evening. But it wasn't a negotiation exercise, right? Because there were other people who had need for the car, and it was a privilege to take the car. And so you might start out by kind of buttering up mom or dad. Gee, dad, that's a nice tie. Or mom, you're looking especially like your haircut today, or what have you. Just to, great dinner, mom, just to get them in the mood for the request. So you start with praise. Then you go to your ask. You go to, I really would like to go out with my friends. We're going to this movie. It just came out, and I'm the only one who has my license, and could I take the car tonight? And then if you get a yes, then you end with thanksgiving. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, right? That is sort of the structure of asking to borrow the car. Praise, the big ask, and then thanksgiving. And this exactly is the structure of the Tefillah or Amidah service. The progression goes from, okay, I'm supposed to not be blank here. Let's see what happened to my, I don't know what happened to that slide. It's supposed to have 3 words on it. Oh, there it is. I made it fancy. 3 prayers of praise, that's the buttering up part, praising God. 16 prayers of petition in a weekday service. And we're going to look at that in our Siddur today. So if you have your Siddur nearby, you can grab it or maybe go get it right now. And the third section is 3 prayers of thanksgiving. So every single service with the Tefillah in it has the 3 prayers of praise and the 3 prayers of thanksgiving. Every regular weekday service has the petitionary prayers in them, and if you add up the number of prayers, you get to the number 19, right? And we said also that the Tefillah or the Amidah section of the service is sometimes known as the Shmona Esrei, the 18, because originally it had 18 prayers, an additional prayer of petition, but another one got added. So it's called the 18, but there really are 19, but only on weekdays, because it's considered inappropriate to ask anything of God on Shabbat or a holiday. On Shabbat, we praise and we thank, but we don't ask for stuff, even if it's values like, peace or wisdom or good leaders or whatever. Even God gets to rest and doesn't have to be petitioned or asked for things on Shabbat. And so that's probably why it seems strange to you, like, wow, I don't remember a part of the service that long with 19 prayers in it. The reason is that on Shabbat, we replace all of those 16 with one prayer praising God that we have Shabbat, or on a holiday, praising God that we have that holiday. So if you open up your Siddur and turn to page 76, this is a weekday service. And you'll see, I don't know if you've ever noticed the sidebars on your Siddur. On each page of your Siddur, there's a sidebar that shows you on the left side of the two-page spread in transliteration, on the right side of the two-page spread in Hebrew, so you can look at it either one you want. It shows you what section we're in and all the prayers that are in it, and the prayer that's bold in black is the one we're on right now. So on page 76 or 77 if you prefer, it's showing you that we're in the tefillah section of the service. If you were to count up all of those things in the sidebar, how many do you think there would be?
16.
There'd be 19 actually, because this is showing you, and it even divides them, like I mentioned, 3, and there's a break, and then 16, and then a break, and then whoops, it's supposed to be 3, but it's 4 because it includes silent prayer, Tfilat Alev. So if you go to the next page, 78 or 79, you'll see that now the top one isn't bolded on the sidebar, but the second one is. So it's sort of a guide to where we are in the service right now. But if you compare, for example, 78 to the Shema and its blessings part of the service, if you look at 78 and 72 at the same time, or 79 and 73 if you prefer the transliteration, you see how much longer of a section the Tefillah or Amidah is. And that whole middle section of 16 prayers, we do not say on Shabbat. So,
excuse me, what page? I just got my
78
78
or 79.
Okay,
we're looking at the weekday tefillah, and we're looking at the sidebar that shows you all of the prayers in the Amidah section of the service, the 3 prayers of praise, the 16 petitions, and the 3 of thanksgiving, except they've added one more, which is silent prayer. If you want to take a look at all these little petitionary prayers, go to 84. They begin on 84. And here you do want to always look at the right side because it's really an alternative reading on the left page. All the way from 84 to 90, and you'll see they're all little tiny prayers. It's really usually a sentence or 2, and then the final seal of the prayer or the Khatimah of the prayer, which kind of summarizes the meaning of the prayer. You may be very unfamiliar with these because we don't have a weekday service at Beth Hillel. Unless there's something special like Shiva. So if you've ever been to a weekday Shiva service, all of a sudden we were reading all these little tiny prayers and it seems to take forever. These are all the petitionary prayers where we're asking God for various favors. So we're going to come back to the meaning of each of the prayers, not in a lot of detail, but to give you an idea, let's go back now to 76. Anything about the overall structure of the Amidah or Tefillah before I go into a little explanation of some of the prayers? Okay, so the 3 praise prayers are the one on 76, which we often call Avot or Avot ve'imahot. Avot means fathers and imahot means mothers. And this is the prayer where we list the patriarchs and the matriarchs. So we have this idea in Jewish tradition that we in our generation get credit from God or merit from God because of these great ancestors. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be worthy today. And this is a value in Jewish life called zechut avot. Because of the merit, zechut is merit, because of the merit of the ancestors, God views us with merit today. And so we bless God for these ancestors in the first prayer. Those of you who grew up in Judaism a long time ago, remember that it used to be just avot, the fathers, and the mothers were added later, probably in the 1970s for the first time in Reform Judaism, maybe 80s. And at first we didn't have it in our prayer book, and we kept adding them even though they weren't there, and then finally they got added into the prayer book. And now the conservative movement also adds the imahot, the mothers. Traditional prayer books still, you're just thanking God for the merit of the fathers, the patriarchs. The second major prayer in the praise section is on 78, and this is where it's called Gevurot, which means powers. So we thank God for God's various powers, and we list them when we read them in Hebrew or English. We thank God for supporting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive, etc. And one of the things that's curious about this prayer, maybe to you, is that why are there always words in parentheses? So if you look in the first line of the transliteration, or the second line, you'll see the word metim in parentheses, and it comes back 2 more times, including the very last 2, I guess 3 more times. The very last 2 lines have metim again. The word metim means the dead. So among the powers listed in this prayer, traditionally speaking, is the power to give life to the dead. In other words, resurrection of the dead, which to some of you may be a surprise that there is such a concept in Judaism. There is. It's one of many different ideas about what happens after we die. And you can probably imagine a very traditional idea about what happens after we die, that God does resurrect the dead at the end of time when the Messiah comes. But by the time the reformers were changing the prayer book and wanting not to say things they didn't believe in, they didn't believe in that idea. They didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. And so they changed this word. Instead of mechaye hametim, to give life to the dead, they changed it to mechaye hakol. We thank God for giving life to all. And when this prayer book was put together, now, like 13 years ago already, in 2007 it came out, there was a movement within the Reform movement, which is true in a lot of different areas, to return to the tradition, because that's an idea that if you want to, you can believe in as a Reform Jew. Why do we have to have it gone? And they debated whether we go back to metim or we keep hakol, and you can see that the solution was to codify hakol, give life to all, but to give the alternative if someone wants to read metim, if they're leading the service or just in their own pew to say it, that they can say it. The third, and I'll stop after 4 questions after the third one. The third prayer in the praise section is praising God for God's holiness, creating holiness in the world, and that God is holy and we recognize God's holiness. There are 2 versions of it. There's an evening version on 80, and there's a weekday morning or afternoon version on 82. You may know this as Atah Kadosh or Nekadesh et Shimcha Ba'olam. It's the prayer where in the morning service we go up on our toes, Kadosh, 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 which means holy, holy, holy. And I think we talked about that before in the choreography section, that this is actually a quotation from the book of Isaiah, where Isaiah has a vision of God, and Isaiah sees angels calling back and forth to each other and saying, holy, holy, holy. And so we sort of imitate them in this prayer. We try to raise ourselves up to a level of holiness like the angels. And we talked about why there are 2 different versions. This is another example, probably because there were 2 different traditions of what to say at this part of the service. And when the Siddur was codified or put into the form we know it, standardized, they didn't want to exclude anything, so they called one for the evening and one for the morning, generally people are more in a hurry to get home in the evening, so they made the evening one shorter and the morning one longer. So those are the 3 prayers of praise that always start out the tefillah section before going into petition in a weekday service, or the Shabbat service the Shabbat prayer on a Shabbat service, or a holiday prayer on the holiday service. Questions about the 3 initial prayers of praise before I go on to the petitions? Okay. In the petitions, then, again, 84 to 90, you'll find all of them on the even page. These are the little short ones, and they are, you can just go, if you just look at the last line, the blessed are you line, the Chatimah of each prayer, you'll see the meaning of it. So these are the ones where we're asking God for favors. Grace us with knowledge, and then in the end, we bless you, God, for gracing us with knowledge. The next one, return us to your Torah and draw us near to your service. So it's about repentance, asking God to accept us when we repent. The third one, asking God to forgive us. Some people think that we only have prayers of forgiveness on the high holidays. Not true. In any weekday service, you can ask God for forgiveness of things that you want to be forgiven for. I mean, you can do it any time, but formally in a structured service, any weekday service offers a chance to petition God for forgiveness. The one at the bottom of 84 is asking God to redeem us, redeem Israel. In other words, this is more like not fixing us as individuals, but fixing us as a group, saving us as a people from trouble. Page 86 was where the next set are. There's a prayer for healing. I'm going to come back to this because, as you know, there's a later part in the service where we do a Mishaberach. But here is a prayer for asking God to heal the sick. And then the next one, bless our year and its abundant harvest. We thank God ask God to bless the earth, that we have good produce, and the earth will be rich and productive. 86 at the bottom, asking God for freedom for the oppressed. 88, asking God to make just rulers in all lands, that rulers will rule with righteousness and justice. And sort of its companion is the next one, and God, please get rid of wickedness. I think the traditional prayer says wicked people or wicked rulers, but just asking God to shatter wickedness and make it vanish from the earth. The prayer at the bottom of 88 is asking God to support those who are righteous, not just leaders, but all righteous people. And then 90, there's a prayer where we ask God to turn in compassion to Jerusalem, give peace to Israel and Jerusalem. And the next one is about that all people will be delivered from trouble and give all people hope. And then the last one, hear our voice, is after we ask for all these petitions, we petition God to hear our prayers. Please listen to all these petitions and hearken to what we've said. Listen, understand and respond to what we've said. Now, some of these versions that you have here are Reformed versions of what was a very different prayer. That's going to come up in the next prayer too, the Avodah, or sometimes known as Ritzeh. For example, in the one that's about the rulers of all lands, let's see, and the one about proclaiming our freedom, they're very particularistic about the Jewish people, save the Jewish people from oppression, make just rulers for our people. And our prayer book has turned these more into universalistic prayers of petition, not just about the Jewish people. Maybe the only one that is somewhat particularistic is the one about peace in Jerusalem. So if you were to open an Orthodox Siddur, you would see differences in the text, not just in the English, but they've actually changed the Hebrew too here. Again, we're asking God for favors, so we don't do that on Shabbat, and so it would be replaced with a prayer for thanking God for Shabbat. Mikadesh HaShabbat may sound familiar to you. And the last three that are always the same, that's the Thanksgiving prayer. Is supposedly, a lot of them sound pretty much like petitions to me too, but supposedly these are the prayers of Thanksgiving. The first one, which you may know as Ritzeh, but it's really called Avodah, which means worship, originally was a prayer, and still is in the Orthodox prayer book, a prayer asking God to restore the temple in Jerusalem and to restore the sacrificial cult. Needless to say, in Reform Judaism, even in its earliest stages in the early 1800s in Europe, there was no interest in returning to the temple and rebuilding the temple so we could slaughter animals again. And so they changed it to a prayer about God accepting our words for worship instead of, doesn't say instead of sacrifices, but that's how they changed the prayer. And if you go to 94, you'll see Modim Anachnu Lach. That's, a prayer of thanksgiving. We thank God for all of the favors in our lives, every time of day, every kind of favor that we experience in our lives. And then the very familiar prayers of peace, or the last one, 96, Shalom Rav in the evening, Sim Shalom in the morning. Again, there were two versions, and so they both got put in the prayer book. Asking God to grant peace to all people. It does say Shalom Rav al Yisrael, that maybe the universalistic part of it was, a little bit different in the Reform version, but a prayer for peace on the people of Israel and all people. It's the last prayer that we always do in this progression. And then finally, there's always a silent prayer, right? And in this book, if you go to 98, you'll see Birkat Shalom for the weekday morning. There's Sim Shalom. And then on 100 and 101, you've got options for silent prayer. Most Jews are not really comfortable with silent prayer. We're used to having the words on the page and somebody telling us what to say, the book telling us what to say, the leader of prayer leading us. And I think a lot of Jews don't know what to do during the silent prayer. And because of that, even in the silent prayer, you're provided with options. So the one that's always at the beginning in Hebrew and English, God guard my speech from evil and my lips from deception, was actually the prayer of Mar, the son of Ravina, who in the early days of the prayer book, apparently people felt that just a blank spot there wasn't good enough. So they asked a wise sage to write down what does he pray in the silent prayer. And that was written down. But really it's your opportunity for kavanah, for your own personal intention and spontaneity. There are other points that we sometimes add in the service for silence, but this is the main type, the main section. And I don't know if some of you feel like there's not enough silence in the prayer service. I've had people say that to me before, especially someone who came from a Quaker background where they only do silence. That's how they pray. I said, gee, there's a lot of words in your service. I could use more time just for silence. How do folks feel about the amount of time we have for silence in our service? And do you feel awkward when that comes up, or do you like that part? Anyone?
It seems like sometimes it's too short of a period of time, and other times it's just the right amount.
Agreed. I think it depends on the day and what I have to ask for, be thankful for, or recognize.
Anyone feel like it's awkward and way too long and I think it just drags on?
Honestly, on a
Yeah.
Friday night, I worry I'm going to nod off because I'm tired from the week. And I'm worried like if I'm not doing something, I'll start snoring and really embarrass myself.
I mean, I don't time it, but I just, read myself, some of the readings or think what I want to think and figure, okay, if I'm done, everybody else must be done, but maybe not. Anyone feel like it's any other comments on that?
I think it could be a little longer. I would be comfortable with that.
I also add other places where a lot of people don't for silence, like before the Amidah starts. This tradition got started to sing Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, which God opened up my lips, but that's supposed to be a private meditation time too. And so I add that as a private moment too.
I had an interesting experience. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. We went on a Rhodes Scholar program a number of years ago in Savannah. It was Jewish Georgia or whatever. And it was very interesting because we went to Friday night services in the synagogue there in Savannah, which is actually built just like a church because the architect didn't know anything about synagogues. But anyway, the point is the rabbi, when he got to silent prayer, it was almost 5 minutes that he had us sitting there. And at first I thought, this is really long. But then I found that I kind of liked the idea because it allowed my mind to sort of settle and think about something I wanted to, concentrate on or think about in this time. And I didn't feel like I was being rushed. And I found the 5 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever it was, but it was fairly long, to be a nice experience.
Interesting. Guess
I've
you don't
never
know till you
had
try.
that anyplace else, but it was nice.
All right. Well, that's my presentation on the tefillah or the Amidah. So any overall questions or comments on that before we go on?
I have a question. So if we're not to ask for blessings or whatever of God on Shabbat, because it's God's day to rest as well.
Mhm.
I have that right. So when Yom Kippur is on Shabbat, I mean, that's where we're constantly saying, inscribe us in the book of life.
Mhm.
So does it change? Does the service change?
Yeah, Yom Kippur trumps Shabbat.
What? It
Trump.
trumps-
I hate to use that word, but it trumps Shabbat. Because even like on Shabbat, you're supposed to have oneg, joy, right?
Uh-huh.
So a festive meal and an oneg Shabbat and, enjoying time with your family and Yom Kippur is none of that, right? So Yom Kippur takes precedence over Shabbat.
Oh, okay. Because it seemed like, wasn't it this past year that it was on Shabbat, I think?
Honestly, I can't remember if it was or it wasn't.
No, this year was on a
this year
Thursday.
they were all on weekdays.
Yeah, it's on Thursday.
But maybe, yeah.
But it happens, pretty often. And, like I said, sometimes these prayers like Shalom Rav, we're asking God for peace in the world. I mean, that is a kind of a petition, but it's not considered one of these 16 petitionary prayers. So I think the line is blurred sometimes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think for most of us, the most common type of prayer that we understand as prayer is petition. Even like when we are in silent prayer, maybe some of us are thanking or praising God or counting our blessings, but I bet a lot of people are asking for stuff. and, or, I'm not saying like, tangible stuff, but asking for good things in their lives. And even the Mishaberach, right? Which we, I'm about to talk about it, but in every service we're asking God for healing for those who are suffering, right? From various types of illnesses. So the lines blur, but I guess the point is we don't want to spend a lot of time on Shabbat asking God for favors and focus more on blessing and thanksgiving. Let's go to the Mishaberach next. Let me share my screen again here, present. Okay. Are you seeing it big again?
Yep.
Okay.
Not seeing anything.
Well, it's an M here. It's coming. Okay. Now, are you seeing something?
Yep.
Praise.
Praise
Okay.
petition.
Now do you see Mishaberach?
Yep.
Yes.
Now we're
All right.
good.
So if you want to look at the traditional words of the Mishaberach, you'll find them on page 371 in your Siddur. And I always have you turn to 370, or almost always have you turn to 371, because it has the version of the Mishaberach that we sing. But in fact, at the top of the the top of the page are the words to the traditional Mishaberach. And I'm skipping outlining the Torah service tonight, just focusing on a few prayers. And I've chosen in the Torah services where we do the Mishaberach, and this is what I'm choosing to focus on. The Mishaberach, the word means may the one who blessed, and then fill in the blank. May God bless for various things. It's not just for healing. So there are Mishaberach for people who came up for the Torah. There's a special Mishaberach for them. We don't do them all, just in the interest of time. But in a traditional congregation, anyone who came up for a Torah blessing or aliyah would have a Mishaberach said for them. God bless you for coming up, for having this honor. We ask God's blessings upon you, not because you're ill, just to bless you for, serving in this role and having this honor in the synagogue. It would be a time to bless someone for going on a journey. If they're about to make a trip somewhere, they might want to be called up to the bima for being blessed as they go on their way. It would be the time that a wedding couple would be blessed, or a bar mitzvah would be blessed. I don't know if you've noticed that, after the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah reads her Torah portion, they turn to their parents and the parents say a blessing for them. It's a kind of a Mishaberach. Most of us just know it as the Mishaberach for those in need of healing. But if you look on 371 on the facing page, on 370, there's a Mishaberach for Aliyah. And there's also opportunities to bless the bride and groom and the bar mitzvah. All these things are opportunities that occur during the Torah service. And usually when the Torah is out is when the Mishaberach is done. I put the Torah back in its stand or in the lap of someone in non-COVID times, simply because I'm just managing the Torah and the guitar, and it's just too much. But it's supposed to be done when the Torah is still out on the table. And if you look at the top of 371, you'll see there's this long Hebrew prayer. This is a little bit shortened from the traditional one, but it's usually recited for the person or persons there. May the one who blessed our ancestors, bless and heal those who are ill. We list the names. It's traditional to use the Hebrew name if we have it. May the holy and blessed one be filled with compassion for their health, be restored to strength and vigor, be revived, and may God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say amen. That is what you would hear in a traditional congregation. You would not hear the congregation singing a song. And in the Reform movement that I grew up in, there was no such thing as a Mishaberach. So the one that we saw earlier, the prayer for healing in the Amidah section, is just a short blessing for healing. You don't recite names. This here, it's more opportunity to, it's like community announcements. You know, it's a Misha Berach where you're going to actually name the people who are ill from the community or others that people want to raise up. And I have a YouTube here that I'm going to show you because the version that we usually sing in the middle of 371 is the version by Debbie Friedman, who I mentioned earlier when we were talking about music. In many ways, revolutionized Jewish prayer. And it wasn't her, single-handedly. There were other people like Jeff Klepper and Danny Friedlander. And I mean, I could list lots of other ones. But she really single-handedly turned the Misha Berach into this moment in the service that people really, really cherish and love. And it's because she wrote a musical version of it. I believe I'm correct that she wrote it after she herself went through a very scary, lengthy illness. And she wrote this prayer during her recovery. And I just wanted to give her credit for it by playing her singing it, because I don't feel that I do justice to it when I sing it. So here she is.
It would be really hard for me to, especially in these times, to be with so many people and to not sing the Misha Berach with you. So I'm just going to do it. And I'll sing it first for you and ask you not to sing along. And then I'll ask you to join with me and to hold in your minds and hearts the names of those people in your lives in need of healing. And for all of those across the seas, all of those we don't know, and all of those for whom there is no one to ask for blessings of healing and well-being. This is for you. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say amen. This is still for you. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say amen. Misha Berach Avotenu.
So I just wanted to have you, if you've never seen Debbie Friedman or heard her, tragically she passed away in her 50s. I think this recording was done in 2001. I think it's been at least 10 or 15 years since she passed away now. And, you know, she was not trained musically. She was a folk singer, guitar player, folk singer. And yet now the School of Sacred Music at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, where cantors are trained, is called the Debbie Friedman School of Music in her memory.
Dina, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. I mean, I think she deserves so much credit. And I know when they made this prayer book, there were already lots of other Misha Berachs. You know, since she wrote one, there are all these other healing prayers, and there are whole healing services, as you know, which never existed before her. And they talked about what they should put on this page, and they decided that they were going to really canonize her by putting just her Misha Berach there. And it's sung, I've heard it sung in conservative congregations, I've heard it sung in traditional congregations. It's crossed over, you know, it's not just a Reform movement thing anymore. For good reason. All right, anything else about Misha Berach before we move on to the closing parts of the service? I'll get my screen back up there if I can find it. Let's see. Oh, no, I don't want that. Sorry, I don't want that. I want to get out of that. Oh, okay. Oops, no, I don't want that.
Was Debbie Friedman a rabbi or a cantor or
no,
both?
Neither.
Neither. I didn't realize that.
She was at Olin Sang Ruby Union Institute. She was a counselor and she was from St. Paul. And, you know, when she was a teenager, she started playing the guitar and singing and turning prayers into music, into folk music. And then she, you know, worked at Asrui at Olin Sang Ruby, and she brought her music there. And she had this youth choir at Mount Zion in St. Paul that was her first albums that she recorded. She had that choir recorded on. Yeah, so she just, she became a cantorial soloist, you know, at congregations. But mainly she was a composer and songwriter.
I took
performer, I should say.
I took Irmgard and Ellen Stein. We went to see her when she was in Skokie at that light. That one's I can't remember the name of the theater, but it was she was awesome. Yeah. I guess that's all I can say. She was just awesome.
She was very spiritual, as you could tell, I think, from that yes. Recording. And her concerts weren't just concerts. I mean, she also had a good sense of humor, and she wrote funny songs, but she just contributed a huge amount to what modern Jewish prayer is. So let's quickly go on to the closing parts of the service. The Aleinu and the Kaddish are the main features of the closing part of the service. The Aleinu is on 586 if you have your Siddur, and typically we do the one at the bottom of the page, which is the traditional Aleinu. But there are a lot of alternative Aleinus. Even in this prayer book, you can see 3 of them. There's one on the top of 586, the one on the bottom of 586, and the one on the top left of 587. And it's not just the English alternatives here, but the Hebrew. And the reason is that some people find the traditional wording problematic. So if you look at the bottom of 586, let us now praise the sovereign of the universe and proclaim the greatness of the Creator, who has set us apart from the other families of the earth, giving us a destiny unique among the nations. We bend the knee and bow, acknowledging the supreme sovereign, the Holy One of blessing. Well, it doesn't sound problematic there, but I'm telling you that is not a literal translation of what the words say. That has been modified and cleaned up a little bit by the writers of this prayer book. What it really says is Shalo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, that you didn't make us like the other families of the earth. Velo samanu kamishpechot adama, and you didn't place us like the families of the earth. Shalo sam chelkenu kahem, you didn't make our portion like theirs. V'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, or our destiny like everybody else. Why do you think some people find that problematic? Thank you for not making us like the nations of the earth, for not making our portion like theirs, for not giving us their portion, and for not giving us their destiny.
Well, it makes us sound very special
Mm-hmm. Yes.
that we were picked out to be different.
Mm-hmm. Special. What other words might you use?
That we're better than others.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, in many times in our history, it probably was necessary to remind ourselves of this because our people were so downtrodden and oppressed and persecuted. On the other hand, our lives aren't so bad right now, and to many ears, this feels kind of like we're better than everybody else. They don't feel comfortable saying it. So these other versions have grown up, and so you can, if you just skim over the English of the other two, you'll see that they don't have that idea. So the whole Aleinu isn't this prayer. There's this in the beginning, and then there's this I would say is a particularistic prayer, thanking God that we are who we are in one way or another. But then on page 588 through 591, you have prayers that are very universalistic, asking God to, make the whole world a better place, almost like a messianic type of idea that, one day all the problems of the world will be gone, corruption and evil will give way to integrity and goodness, etc. And so altogether, the Aleinu is a combination of a particularistic prayer, thanking God for who we are, and a universal hope for a better world. But some people, that initial part rubbed them the wrong way, and so there are alternatives. I tend to sing the traditional one, partly because I want people, when they go to other settings, to know the prayers. And so I do the traditional Aleinu so people will know that. But, we also, I don't know if you know, there's an even newer one that's in the High Holy Day prayer book that we've been singing with a different melody. That's, more universalistic, even in the Aleinu part. Aleinu means it's upon us, like what are our responsibilities? And so here it's upon us to thank God that we're special. But in the more universalistic version of it that we've been singing on the High Holidays, alternatively to this one, we've talked about it's upon us to work with other people to make the world a better place. So it sort of segues into the rest of the Aleinu. And then I wanted to say a word about Kaddish. We always end the service with Kaddish, which is the traditional prayer for the dead. And I don't know how many of you are aware that if you go to 598, I don't know if you ever just look at the English when we're reciting the Kaddish.
It's praising.
Yeah, what is it, Dick? Say it again.
It's all praising God.
Yeah, it doesn't say a word about death.
Right.
So most people are very surprised by that. We talked before about how it's written in Aramaic. It's a little bit different than Hebrew. But it doesn't at all talk about death. It's exalted and hallowed be God's name. God's majesty is revealed in our lifetime. And then especially the middle paragraph, blessed, praised, honored, exalted, extolled, glorified, adored, and lauded be the name of the Holy and Blessed One. That's the Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, that part. It's the, Yit Barach, Yish Tabach, Yit Pa'ar, Yit Roman, Yit Naseh. That's that part of it. It apparently was a very popular prayer that people just had memorized. And in the time when their everyday language was Aramaic, and it would be something that would naturally roll off their lips at a time of sadness, like at a cemetery or at a funeral. And so it became associated with death. It doesn't really have anything to do with death, except maybe thanking God, remembering to praise God. And even when we're remembering our dead, that, we had this person with us when we did, and that we had a good experience in life with them when they were alive. And then there's, there are other parts of the service where we do most of this prayer, the Chatzi Kaddish, but what's added for the mourner's Kaddish is the very last part, which because we do it at other times in the service. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imaru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say amen. And some people think of that as the harmony on high, as, my loved one is with God in the heavens, and we ask for peace in the heavens above and down here as well. I think it's you're probably familiar with how everyone stands during the Kaddish, although that is not universally done. In traditional congregations, only those who are observing a yahrzeit, an anniversary of a death, or who have lost a dear one recently will stand during the actual prayer. So as a nod to that, I ask people to stand during the meditation prior to the Kaddish. But we observe the tradition that grew up in Reform Judaism, that everybody stands for the Kaddish in solidarity for those who are in mourning, and remembering those who have no one to say Kaddish for them, especially after the Holocaust. That became important. In terms of the Kaddish, I just want to share with you a traditional understanding of why the Kaddish is so important. I don't know if you are aware of the tradition that sometimes people will, if they want to say Kaddish, there's a tradition that you say it for your parent every day for 11 months after they die. And if that's a hardship for you, that you can pay someone to say the Kaddish for you. I don't know if you've heard of this custom. And of course, in traditional Judaism, only men have the obligation to say Kaddish. Women do not. So I just want to share a traditional view about the Kaddish that I took from a traditional website. A parent brings a child into this world. A child can bring a parent into the world to come. As a soul leaves this world and begins its journey upward, its children can help it along its way. When a child brings more light and holiness into this world, the parent's soul climbs higher. Reciting Kaddish is one such powerful tool of light bequeathed to the sons of the deceased. The Kaddish is really just a frame around the central words recited by the entire congregation. It is traditionally a call and response. May his great name be blessed forever and ever. When the mourner recites the Kaddish and the congregation responds, bursting out in those words of unison, a flash of light breaks into all the worlds, and the soul of the deceased soars upward. Even if there is no son, another Jew is still able to help the soul by saying Kaddish. We are all connected. So, I don't know how many of us see the prayer that way, but it's something that is, many Jews, even if they don't see it quite this way, it's very important to them to be able to say the Kaddish, especially for their parents. And, that's why we have the names on the plaques, and people make an effort to come to the synagogue to be there when the name is read in the synagogue. You don't have to have a plaque to have the name read, but it's a very common tradition. And another tradition, which is nice to know about, is when it is your parents' yahrzeit, to make a donation to the synagogue in memory of that person. That's a very old, long-standing Jewish custom. So questions or comments on Aleinu or Kaddish?
I seem to remember that when I was young and my parents said Kaddish, for someone in their immediate family, they said it for 30 days.
Yes, for next of kin, which is parent, child, sibling, or spouse, you say it for 30 days, but everything but parent. But for parents, you say it for 11 months. So that's, I keep the name on the list in our synagogue for a temple member or someone is observing a recent death for 30 days. I don't read, even if someone's parent died, I don't read it every time for a year, but they may come and observe it as much as they can. Unfortunately, I have to teach something else at 8, so I'm gonna close up now. And Jill had a question about Sufganiyot, and I'll share the answer with you, Jill. And Sandy had a question about whether there still is matchmaking in the Jewish community, and yes, there is in the Orthodox world, very much so. And my grandparents on my mother's side were matched that way, so but it still exists today. So I just want to, I have a few slides for closure that I want to get to here. And the theme here is that, you may still have questions, and you don't have to stop having questions. If you are interested in learning more about the prayer book, we have a new book in our library called B'chol Avacha, which I donated to the library in honor of Bunny's adult bat mitzvah, along with another book. And this is a really wonderful, easy reading book that uses our prayer book and then is like a commentary on it, and it's got terrific stuff in it. I also wanted to, there's the Sufganiyot answer I was going to do. It may come from the tradition. The food doesn't come from the Talmud, but the name they took out of the Talmud, I guess. I can send that to everybody if you're interested. And then, just if you have more questions, I have a couple suggestions for you for where to go for answers. One is the website mygewishlearning.com.
Yeah, I love that website.
It's, there were times when I consulted it for my preparation for tonight. It's just almost anything you could think of, they've come up with an answer to there. And it's not real scholarly, it's real, popular way of, it's popular reading. It's not real intense scholarly reading. So I highly recommend that. And then this book, Jewish Literacy by Joseph Telushkin, is more, it's as it says here, important things to know about the Jewish religion, its people, and history. It might not have what are Sufganiyot, but it might have something on, what is the Jewish idea of the Messiah, for example. And it's generally a page and a half at most for each entry, which I think is very accessible to most people. And finally, I also, this doesn't mean you can't ever ask me a question again. You can, whenever you have a question, just send it my way. I'll try to answer it for you. But I love this reading, which is in the Haggadah that we use in our house, about the importance of asking good questions. Isidore I. Rabi, the Nobel laureate in physics, was once asked, "Why did you become a scientist rather than a doctor or lawyer or businessman like the other immigrant kids in your neighborhood?" And he answered, "My mother made me a scientist without ever intending it. Every other Jewish mother in Brooklyn would ask her child after school, 'Nu, did you learn anything today?' But not my mother. She always asked me a different question. 'Izzy,' she would say, 'did you ask a good question today?' And that difference, asking good questions, made me become a scientist." So I hope you'll continue asking good questions. And it's been great teaching you. Been a wonderful group. And I'm going to have to go now because I have to go train our Hebrew tutors for half an hour or so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great class. Thank you
very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll end the way we started.